Hi, my name is James Longstreet. I'm the president of Fivefold Wealth Management. And today I'm speaking with a special guest, Rob Levy, who is the owner and managing director of Border Gold. They're one of the premier bullion dealers in Canada. And personally, I've had a wonderful experience working with Rob. Rob is very passionate about understanding the markets. He's also a regular contributor on radio stations CKNW out of Vancouver and Global TV as a commentator. And he also does writing on precious metals and on the markets. And a very close friend of mine introduced me to Rob last year in 2021. And I had heard about Border Gold in the past. In fact, I placed an order through Border Gold back in 2011, I believe it was. So there's a few reasons why I started working with Border Gold, aside from, of course, the fact that my friend spoke very highly of you, Rob. Number one, Border Gold and its predecessor companies has been around for over 50 years, since the late 1960s, I believe it is. And secondly, Border Gold is one of few bullion dealers in Canada that has a direct contract with the Canadian Mint, which is one of your suppliers. And also, what I really appreciate about working with you, Rob, is that you really do try and create real value for your clients and the marketplace, both through high quality products and also through competitive pricing. In fact, Border Gold beats most bullion dealers in Canada in terms of pricing. So, Rob, without me sharing too much more, as the owner of Border Gold, why don't you start by telling me a little bit more about yourself, about your career path, and also about the history of Border Gold?
Yeah, thank you, James, and thank you for the introduction. It's nice to be speaking with you and your clients today. Border Gold's been around since 2000, and as you said, our predecessor companies, but it was my father who was in this business, and predates me all the way back to the 60s, selling gold to Americans when it was illegal to buy gold in the United States before Nixon opened the gold window, but he could sell it out of Canada and export to the United States. There's nothing illegal about that. So, it shows our history in the business, and, also to do with our history in the business. And something I always like to highlight and focus to clients is we're not some new entrant just because the gold market's a little hot right now. And, people were talking about it out of the pandemic. We've been through many cycles, whether it's, the bull market that began in 2002 or the financial crisis or this last pandemic with COVID. We've seen ups and we've seen downs too, which there are in every market. But, I came in back around 2012, a student of economics. I did an undergrad and master's degree in economics, but then got the real world experience and came to work and, been in this business for almost a decade now, or coming up on a decade, and really loving it every day because it's working directly with customers. And as you said, we're competitive on price, and we always aim to have the best price for the products that we sell in this country, because we know very well that nothing differentiates us from our competitors in terms of the products that we're moving. So the only thing that we can offer is the best service and the best price point for customers to invest with us. So as long as we can make a little bit of money, we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Rob. That's fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that. So next question I want to ask you here is what are your thoughts right now on the financial markets, and what concerns do you have?
The concerns I have coming out of this pandemic, there's a number of them, and they're sort of everywhere you look right now, whether it's on the domestic front and it's inflation and what's going to happen to household demand because we're facing higher and higher prices, and how much money does that leave on the margin for growth in the rest of the economy. That's a looming uncertainty, I think, in this market as central banks raise interest rates. And finally we heard a Canadian bank economist the other day say maybe there's an end in sight for the Bank of Canada, but certainly through the month of May, that's been all the chatter, is how high are interest rates going to go. Geopolitically, you look at Russia, Ukraine, and the instability and the volatility that creates, and higher prices, or just with China and the zero COVID policy, and what that's done to the equity markets. Teetering on a bear market with the S&P almost down 20%, and what it's done to growth and technology stocks is just absolutely, I'd say, rip the floor out from underneath the market. So it's the uncertainty right now that we talk about, the most probably overused word in the financial market dictionary lexicon. Everybody talks about it, but it just seems like it's greater than ever. And that's why I always focus on a little bit of gold as your stability.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so breaking that down a little bit further. So we're in Canada here. So just talking specifically for Canadians. So what concerns do you have specifically for Canadians about the financial markets? And also let's talk about inflation. And do you believe that inflation is going to be transitory, or that it's likely going to be here to stay?
I was talking about this with someone just the other day, and I think it's my hope, and I think it's a lot of people's hopes that it's transitory, but it seems it's just about the hardest thing to bank on right now. And we look at the three areas that we're most impacted by: food, energy, and housing, and it's so many factors that have been outside of our control. So is it transitory? I hope for a brief period of time that we've seen a peak here in inflation, but it's almost calling the unpredictable right now. When you look at Ukraine, the breadbasket, to Eastern Europe and Africa, and what it's done to food prices in Canada, who can call an end to that without having the forecasting ability to see how long this war is going to play on and what's going to happen to those key ports, so to speak, when you look on that area of the world. So it's just, there is too many unknowns in this market, and it's hard to have any sort of certainty when you look out 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a lot of uncertainty. I certainly agree with you, and of course, the fact that our prime minister has printed more currency in the last since he's been prime minister than all prime ministers before him does not bode well for inflation in the future. So yeah, we've got to be aware of what's happening both here in Canada and globally with the markets. And so let's transition to talking about precious metals. Rob, so why in your opinion should someone hold physical gold and silver, and what's the difference between gold and silver? How do you answer those questions when you're asked?
Sure. The first one has always been a very, very simple one for me. Why people should hold and invest in gold and silver is because I think it's their ultimate hedge to everything else that they own in the financial markets. Dave Rosenberg, he put out a comment the other day, a notable, reputable Canadian economist, but he was with Merrill Lynch during the financial crisis, where he got a bit of a name for himself for having the forecast or calling that downturn during the financial crisis. And everybody thinks he's a bit of a bear and a doom and gloomer, but he points out that gold and US treasuries, those are your only natural hedges to the financial market. So if you're invested elsewhere, every Canadian's got a little bit of their wealth in their house, likely in the housing market, or maybe you got some money in the stock market. Gold is your natural hedge, and you just have to look at a year like we've had, and gold is positive year to date in US dollars, and the markets have turned lower. So to me, it's very simple. Gold is your hedge. I've always thought of myself as sort of a rational investor in the gold business. So I'm not, and I don't want to be, because I'm young and I got a young family. I'm not your natural doom and gloomer that thinks you have to overinvest in gold, but I think you have to have it in your portfolio and have exposure to it. And for me, physical is the best way to do it, because, part of that hedge, it's outside the regular financial system and it's liquid. It's easy to sell. Gold versus silver, to keep it simple, gold is your historical, traditional store of value. So that's what everybody flocks to. And especially when we've had this big run, that started in 2020, but we saw money moving into it beforehand with big institutional investors, central banks. Big money was going into gold before silver. So gold will always attract the large flows of capital. And that's why, if you just keep it simple, you think about gold, but silver is your little higher risk, higher reward. You pay for it with your higher premium. But if you want to diversify a little bit, lower price point, easier entry to the market, then you can certainly think about a little silver. And, you might think of a combination of both. It doesn't have to be binary, one or the other. But to me, it's just keeping it simple. And those are the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a few things there that I want to touch on. So you talk about some of the difference between gold and silver. So if someone were to say to you, hey, Rob, should I buy silver or gold? How do you respond to that?
Easy, both. Yeah. Hey, there's no reason to pick one over the other.
Yeah.
And especially where gold is very portable, and that's what we see a lot of times with customers. And it's stuff, I think, that sounds so simple, but until you actually buy and invest in the metal, you realize it. for round numbers. And every customer is different. Every customer is investing different amounts of money. So don't take this as anything but a round number, but no indication. Someone spends $100,000 and buys precious metals. Gold, you'd be walking out with it in the palm of your hand. Whereas if you bought silver, you'd need a dolly to move it, and it'd take a couple loads. You're not carrying it, in one movement. So trucking it around, laboring it, having somewhere safe to store it, all factors that go into the mix, and certainly the decision when you weigh the two metals.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points there. And one other point you made that I want to just ask you about is the premium. So there's higher premiums certainly right now in silver than there are in gold. So talk about why is that? Why is the premium higher in silver?
Silver as a market and investing in it at a retail precious metal level has the ability to get very tight very quickly. There's only so much supply, especially in the North American market, which is sort of the leading consumer between the US and Canada, and then you've got Europe and Asia. But North America is no question in the United States number one. And it's a business like everything else. So these guys can have the capacity to go out and source metal and produce and hold inventory. But they don't sit on, a huge warehouse of metal just sitting idle. So when we have these markets like we've had since the beginning of January and things just go nuts, you can't keep it on the shelf. Demand so far exceeds supply. And what we've seen is sourcing costs have increased, not alone in the pandemic, but transportation costs. So sorry, the silver market's not alone. You're moving stuff by truck across the country. That all goes into the premium. And then you have a wholesale market where these guys want to make a little bit more money, so their costs have increased because they're dealing in something that's a little tighter. So it all factors into the price, and the fact that demand is so far above supply right now, we've seen historically massive premiums for silver that one day should calm down. And what I say to the customers too is, one, don't under diversify, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But also when looking at silver and precious metals right now, just know that you're paying historically high premiums. So you either got to be very bullish or anticipate selling in a period like this again in the future, because when we're buying back metal right now, customers are being rewarded with a high premium over the paper market.
Yeah, exactly. Right. When you're buying back right now, they're getting a good portion anyway of that premium back. Right. So and you mentioned the tight the tightness of the market, and just just some other numbers that I've heard and listened to from other experts in the space. In a year, there's roughly, call it 850 million ounces of silver mined, and one of the mining execs I was listening to a few weeks ago, the conservative numbers are roughly 200 million ounces of that on a conservative number will come from just two industries, electronic vehicles and solar. And there's just another, over the next several years here, that industrial is going to take up more and more of the silver. And then what's really going to, in the next potentially several years, potentially move the price is going to be the monetary demand, right? So moving on, next question about the metals, and you may have already touched on this, but what would you say, Rob, right now is the big story in gold, and what would you say is the big story in silver?
The big story in gold, and I think it's one that we've been seeing play out, James, it has been the demand for gold, even in a rising rate environment. It's still investor safety. We're reminded that with Russia, Ukraine, we're reminded of that with the Fed still, without really looking back or taking a pause right now, they're raising rates. Gold is holding. And stock markets have been under pressure, had some big moves. The other day, that headline that Target stock falls the most since October of 1987, since Black Friday, in a single day. I mean, that blows your mind. And I mean, they're consumer discretionary. A lot of people might have had Target in their portfolio, and you see how stock can get walloped or hammered just because of one extraneous event. I mean, what's going on with Netflix and the growth stocks. It's just, there's so much risk out there, and it's tricky because as an investor, FOMO, or you got to be on the train, but where do you get the stability or the hedge in your portfolio? To me, it's precious metals, and that's where the gold plays. The silver story, what continues to amaze me, we continue to chat about this, is the level of demand that's out there. One of my major wholesalers who we deal with in the United States, For certain products, one of them, the Buffalo Round, which is a very common staple for the average bullion dealer. They always like to have them on the shelf because it's your alternative to a sovereign coin.
Mhm.
And one of the major ones I deal with is taking orders right now for September, October delivery. So, I mean, it shows you how far ahead, they're able to pre-sell their production. They own a refinery. They're a serious producer in this market. It's not like they, produce a couple thousand coins a week kind of thing. They are a serious producer and contributor to the supply of this market. And they have been able to lock up sales all the way through the summer and into September, October at this point. And, by the time we get there, they could be have caught up or they could be sold out till December by then,
Yeah.
it illustrates how crazy this market is moving right now and how much people want physical metals in their hands.
Absolutely, and it's yeah, like you said, it's a tight market, and just further to that point, yeah, just one of the mining execs that I in the last month or so listened to a few of his interviews. Just speculation, but just with how tight the silver market is, you look at companies like Tesla and Apple, and how are they going to secure their silver moving forward? And this one executive that I listened to said, well, it's possible some of them may become owners of some of these mines in the future, just to hedge themselves, because it's right currently it's all just in time inventory, right? And so very interesting, the tightness of the market. So great points there. So Rob, moving on now. So next question is, if someone wants to become a client of Border Gold, what's the process?
We say, and we like to say, the processes go through you because we like to treat your customers and clients a little better, given the relationship that we have, and given that the onboarding process is a little simpler. They know you, and they're reputable. They're coming to do business right away, so it makes it a little easier on us. So go through you, and that way we can pass on a little savings to your clients. And then the process is simple. You order the metal, you pay for it, we ship it to you, or we've discussed a storage solution like at Brinks, Vancouver, where it's one of the sort of few retail options for secure and insured storage of precious metals for retail clients in Canada. So the delivery is something that's to be determined at a before ordering, but a later date also. So all those kind of options are available. But yeah, definitely go through you and then have the conversations. What products they're looking for. We tend to keep it simple, but there is a variety of options nowadays for customers, and it largely comes down to preferences and demand. Generally, I mean, we always have tended to favor stuff that's just at the best and lowest price point, but different customers have different preferences, and that's okay too. And yeah, and then we ship and fill orders after payment. So we like to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and you know what, the clients that I've introduced to you and Border Gold, Rob, they've been just very, very happy with the customer service and how smooth the process has been. And you mentioned the Brink storage, that's an option, because although I am a believer in having at least some in your possession, there comes a certain point, each person's comfort level, where you may not necessarily want to take possession of certain amounts of metal. So it's nice that there is that Brinks option for clients. And so for clients that do use the Brinks storage option, talk about this. Okay, they put 50 grand of metal into Brinks here today, and 3 years from now, hey, we got to sell a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver. What's that process look like, and how quickly can they get paid?
Yeah. So the one thing that I think gives every customer comfort when we talk about and tell them about the program is the exact coin that they put into storage is the exact one they're going to get back. So that's nice because it's metal that's stored in their name, allocated and designated to them. And say they have a specific bar with a specific serial number on it. If they eventually took delivery, they would see that serial number. So that's something that customers like to hear. They like to know. So just like to throw that one up front. When it comes time to liquidate, it's easy. It's simple as a phone call, confirming the customer's identity, having banking instructions. And that's the beauty of precious metals, is when you need money and you need money quick, you see your favorite stocks down and you want to put it in the market. You need to make a down payment on a piece of real estate. Precious metals are liquid. So, some instances customers are calling us in the morning and they got money in their bank account by the end of the day. So it's really, for us, it's a quick transaction, and all the securities and precautions obviously taking place but their metal's liquid and it's theirs to sell.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so two points you mentioned. One, if they do utilize Brinks, if they choose to take personal delivery, they'll get the exact same bar that was stored for them. And secondly, the ease of if they do need to sell in the future as well. And I actually had another client ask me, he said, well, James, okay, if we store it in Brinks, can I actually go to the location and see it for myself? And if they choose to, they can absolutely do that for a fee, correct?
Exactly right. I mean, that's stuff that we've all worked out with Brinks ahead of time. So customer wants to do an audit, there's a small nominal fee, but they can go and they can see their metals. And to further elaborate on this too, Brinks will seal it. They'll put a seal with a barcode on it, so the customer can actually see the serial number that goes on that box. And as long as there's no transactions in their account over the course of the year or 2 years, and they come back again, they would see the same serial number. There's no reason for Brinks to go in and check because there's no account activity. Things aren't changing. So, it's another sort of safeguard in place, so there's an audit trail and sees the tracking of the customer metals.
Excellent. That's fantastic. So, yeah, well, that's excellent, Rob. So last question, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share as the owner of Border Gold with prospective clients?
No, I think we had a great conversation and covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
Our thing too is, if you get us on the phone, we'll probably talk too much. So, we're always happy to chat with people and answer any questions that they might have, gear them, guide them towards the right product. And obviously too, like we talked about initially, we love to hear that they came through you, and that way we can pass on some discounted pricing too. But if they have any questions, I mean, we run a tight team. I take phone calls too, and if they ever want to chat and discuss, what products we're offering, where we see value potentially in some of the products that we're offering, we're happy to make suggestions to them and help give them as much information as possible so they can make an informed decision.
Excellent. Well, what you stressed there, just I really appreciate your transparency, Rob, and your willingness to speak to the customers one-on-one, and it's been just great customer service with you and the entire team. So really appreciate that. So with that, thank you for your time today. Again, it's been wonderful working with you. I'm looking forward to continuing to throughout this year and into the future, and looking forward to also in a couple of weeks I'll be out in BC, so looking forward to seeing you when I'm out there. So thanks again for your time, Rob. Thanks for the conversation today, and we will certainly be in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you, James.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Have a good day.
You too.